Hey everyone, I am Patterson and I re-edited the Jurassic World Rebirth trailer into something I feel aligns a little bit more with the original Jurassic Park franchise. And I also replaced the new mutant creature with the Spinosaurus from Jurassic Park 3. If you haven't seen the original trailer and my re-edited trailer, both of those can be found in the description down below. I definitely recommend watching those before you watch this breakdown video. But anyways, let's get into it. So how is my re-edit different from the original trailer?
I'll show you.
Jurassic Park has always been about genetically engineered animals that resemble dinosaurs, not generic sci-fi creatures. That's one of the things that sets it apart from other monster movies. So for me, this mutant feels like the wrong direction for the franchise. But let's get back to the Spinosaurus. We haven't seen it in live action since Jurassic Park 3. That's crazy to me. It's a terrifying predator, and I wanted to bring it back in this edit to show just how menacing it can be. So I found this really great free model of it on Sketchfab. The link is in the description if you want to check it out. And it did come rigged, but there was a lot going on, and it kind of terrified me to look at. So I deleted all of it and built my own rig that was a lot simpler and worked better for my needs. And the first shot I started working on was actually this one because it's one of the quickest shots and the least complex in terms of camera tracking and lighting. I probably could have tracked the camera in 3D, but honestly, it's a pretty basic move to the left, and as long as my virtual camera had similar motion, you probably wouldn't be able to tell. I decided to put the Spino on all fours. It's just menacing as fuck. It's like a lion stalking its prey or something. Then I added a flickering red light that matched the movement of the flare in this shot, and then this is the plate that I rendered out from Blender. Next up, compositing. Luckily, I didn't really need to be super precise because it's all pretty dark. I didn't even need to paint out the creature. I just pasted the Spinosaurus plate right on top, created a rough mask, feathered it a ton, and then worked on a more refined roto job for the smoke in the foreground. I think it turned out pretty great. There's a moment in the trailer where you hear a roar from what I'm assuming is the mutant, but you don't actually see anything. It's just a black screen. Since I already had the model of the Spino rigged and ready to go, I just did a quick test animation of it roaring, and it kind of fit perfectly. So I added a couple of palm trees and rendered out the full thing and put it in that blank spot. But I replaced the roar with the Spinosaurus sound effects from JP3, so it ended up just being an extra shot in this re-edited trailer. Next, I worked on the shot I thought would be the hardest, this one where the mutant's foot comes into frame. I knew I would need to paint out the mutant in the background and do some pretty heavy roto for the characters in the foreground. So I started with a camera track in After Effects, took that camera data into Blender, and started animating the Spinosaurus stepping into the light. I had to make sure I lined it up perfectly to the reference shot so the timing would be just right. And from there, I just had to keep experimenting with what I thought looked best. This was the first time I ever animated an animal, so getting the movements to look natural was a fun new challenge. Then I exported that out of Blender and worked on painting out the mutant. I used a couple of still frames and brought them into Photoshop to do the paint work. Once that was done, I could track it to the original footage, get rid of the mutant, do some roto, my least favorite part of compositing, and then put all of the elements together to get this. Finally, we come to the last mutant shot. I really like this environment, but I knew it could be way scarier. I mean, the mutant just standing there looming over the engine guy is already pretty intense, but with the Spinosaurus, it could be so much more threatening. So I tracked the camera movement, even though it was pretty subtle. Then I animated the Spinosaurus creeping in and slowly opening its mouth to eat this guy. I added some thick fog to the scene, just like the original shot, and it took me a while to figure out exactly how the light was changing. Going frame by frame, it looks like there's two sources of light, a floor light and a ceiling light, and they kind of overlap as one turns on and the other turns off. They also don't turn off completely, they just get dimmer as the other one gets brighter. So I went frame by frame to animate the lights to match the original footage, which really ties it all together. So again, I rendered that out of Blender and moved to After Effects for compositing. I just did some basic roto for the main window, but what ended up taking the longest was the rotoscoping on the engine guy. This is what the matte looks like for the roto, and here's how the final shot turned out. Now, before you say anything, I know Jurassic Park 3 isn't everyone's favorite, but I think it deserves more love. It's not perfect, but it delivered some of the most intense sequences in the franchise. And for me, it holds a special place in my heart because it was the first Jurassic Park movie that I got to see in theaters as a kid. So I have a lot of love for it, even if it's not the best. The original Jurassic Park is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's the reason I became a filmmaker and a visual effects artist. I mean, the wonder, the tension, the groundbreaking effects, everything about it shaped how I think about movies. The Jurassic World franchise, it's not my favorite. But when I heard about Jurassic World Rebirth, I was actually pretty excited. It's a fresh start. David Koepp is returning to write the screenplay. Gareth Edwards is directing. It sounded promising. Then I saw the trailer. And honestly, I was less excited. Something about the tone, the color grading, and especially the new mutant just didn't sit right with me. I think the concept of mutations in Jurassic World is interesting, but the design, it feels like a mashup of a xenomorph, the Cloverfield monster, and a rancor. And don't get me wrong, I'm really hoping to be pleasantly surprised by the story. David Koepp wrote the screenplays for both the original Jurassic Park and The Lost World, so I trust him. But both of those scripts had novels as source material, so who knows what we'll get this time. One of the things that made the original Jurassic Park so visually striking was its naturalistic color grading. The greens were rich, there's great contrast, and the dinosaurs looked like they belonged in the real world. So for my re-edit, I color corrected the footage to bring it closer to the look of the original Jurassic Park. You can see in these before and after shots that there was a kind of green haze over most of the trailer, especially for the outdoor shots. I'm just really not a fan of that look. So with these color changes, I really feel like it gives us a really nice bump in contrast and makes the overall picture feel more natural and less stylized, I guess. And you can also probably see that I changed the aspect ratio for this re-edit, and it's going to get nerdy for a bit, but let's talk about it. Typically, major Hollywood movies are released in widescreen or anamorphic widescreen. Widescreen is 1.85 times wider than its height, and anamorphic widescreen is 2.39 times wider than its height. It's great for sweeping horizontal landscapes, but not so good for vertically robust subjects like dinosaurs. A Tyrannosaurus Rex is tall, and being able to frame it in the same shot as a human is difficult, so Spielberg knew what he had to do. In 1993, Jurassic Park was released in widescreen, also known as 1.85 to 1. Jurassic Park, The Lost World, and Jurassic Park 3 were all released with this same aspect ratio. Now, in 2015, when Jurassic World came out, Colin Trevorrow decided to split the difference between 2.39 and 1.85, which is how we got to the not super common aspect ratio of 2 to 1. And honestly, I think it's a great choice. I think it still feels like anamorphic widescreen, but gives you a little bit more height to have dinos and humans together on screen. But then J.A. Bayona came on to direct Fallen Kingdom and went with anamorphic widescreen, 2.39 to 1, which you could argue gives the film a more cinematic look, but I honestly think it made the film stick out in a really weird way, especially because when Colin Trevorrow came back to direct Dominion, he switched back to 2 to 1. I think it would have been much better to keep them consistent and stick with 2 to 1 for all the Jurassic World movies. But now, here we are with Jurassic World Rebirth, flip-flopping yet again to 2.39 to 1. And I know it sounds like a trivial thing to be frustrated about, but choosing the right aspect ratio to tell your story is a lot more important than people realize. Here is a shot of the T-Rex we all know and love in its widescreen theatrical glory. But Jurassic Park was originally shot on 35mm film, which is 1.16 to 1, pretty close to a square. You can see here how much more of the film didn't make it into the final cut. And it's honestly so cool to see what this film looks like uncropped. But the theatrical aspect ratio still gives us great framing of both Dr. Grant and Rexy in the same shot. Let's take a look at this same shot, but with an aspect ratio of 2.39 to 1. It just doesn't feel the same. And look how Rexy gets cut off at the top of the frame. Remember this, it'll be important later. As gorgeous as it is to see Jurassic Park in its uncropped 35mm glory, It's also never how it was meant to be viewed. There are parts in the original 35mm film scan where you can clearly see things left in frame that were never meant to be seen, like sprinklers here, boom mics in the shot, the matte box on the camera lens, all that good stuff. It was only filmed this way to give the director more wiggle room in post-production to reframe the shot if they needed. Okay, now back to Rebirth. If I was directing it and I wanted everyone to feel like we were going back to the roots of the original movies, I definitely would have gone with the original 1.85 to 1 aspect ratio, but somehow 2.39 to 1 returned. Remember how the T-Rex got cut off here when we viewed it in anamorphic widescreen? Well, here's an actual unaltered shot from the Rebirth trailer. Do you see how this shorter aspect ratio ends up cutting off the T-Rex as it starts to roar? I just really don't know why they decided to go this route. I mean, let's just imagine how much better it would look in the 1.85 to 1 aspect ratio. For this re-edit of the trailer, I can't add extra height, unfortunately. I can only zoom in to create a new aspect ratio. This is why I decided to stick with Colin Trevorrow's 2 to 1 aspect ratio, so we didn't lose too much of the visuals on the sides and be more in line with the rest of the Jurassic World movies. The original Rebirth trailer follows a pretty standard action-adventure structure, introducing the mission, assembling the team, explaining the stakes, then escalating into tension and danger, peppered with some moments that are supposed to be funny. While functional, it lacks a true sense of wonder and mystery, like the original Jurassic Park. So for my re-edit, I wanted to start off with John Hammond's voiceover from his Petticoat Lane speech in Jurassic Park. And I used Topaz Labs for super slow motion on these shots from the trailer. I felt like they really give you the sense of beauty and terror of this new chapter of the Jurassic franchise. Just adding John Hammond's speech over some of these shots really connects it to the original film's themes of ambition, wonder, and the ethical dilemmas of genetic engineering. His line, "Creation is an act of sheer will, next time it'll be flawless," reframes the entire trailer as a continuation of that legacy, suggesting that this new story is part of a greater cycle of attempting to perfect what was never meant to exist. It adds emotional weight and a sense of history, setting the stage for the trailer to feel like a continuation of the franchise rather than a standalone action movie. In the original trailer, we start off with Mr. Krabs sorry, I read that wrong. We start off with Martin Krebs introducing Dr. Henry Loomis to Zora Bennett. It makes the mission feel more like an adventurous heist rather than a deadly expedition. In the re-edit, I wanted to keep it focused on the danger and mystery, which feels more in line with Jurassic Park's tone. I think it's a more modern trend for trailers to go a bit more comedic, and I just don't think we want to lean too heavily into it. There's also a small comedic moment with Loomis here, so we don't really need this extra moment right after.
More or less.
More or less?
It's a classic setup then punchline moment which slows down the momentum. Removing it keeps the pacing tighter. And if Zora is so confident to the point of joking about their safety, the mission doesn't feel as risky. Without this part, the stakes feel higher, it strengthens the tone and increases tension. So at this point in my re-edit, I've started with John Hammond's little speech, then quickly show some cuts of intense moments from the trailer that build suspense and curiosity for the mission. In the original, they start in the museum, the characters are introduced, and then we ramp up into where the adventure will take them. I decided to take out these lines.
He's your guy?
We're the best at moving things and people in and out of places they shouldn't be.
This part feels like standard heist movie dialogue, setting up the character's skills rather than focusing on the real tension, the dinosaurs. Removing this keeps things flowing and focus on the mission.
We go towards Barbados. Avoid government patrol.
This is a great line to tell the audience the setting of the movie and a quick glimpse of the obstacles. But this stuff...
But there aren't that many anymore.
Why's that?
No one's dumb enough to go where we're going.
These just aren't necessary lines, and they take us out of the stakes of the story. Obviously, the mission is dangerous. We don't need to call attention to the fact that it's stupid to travel to a remote island running rampant with huge and aggressive dinosaurs. It feels like they're making fun of the audience for suspending their disbelief to engage with the story. So I just kept that first part, and then we move into the mission.
We go towards Barbados. Avoid government patrol.
We need DNA from the 3 biggest dinosaurs.
I also cut this part.
Do we have to get a sample from an egg? I suppose we could try and get it from the parent, but they're a flying carnivore the size of an F-16.
This is really just a moment that feels too silly for the tone I wanted. It honestly makes me worried that I'll be really annoyed throughout the whole film by the incompetence of Mr. Krabs. I mean, Martin Krebs. This is another line I removed.
The worst of the worst? We're left here.
We already kind of get that sentiment from this line here.
These dinosaurs were too dangerous for the original park.
So the worst of the worst line is redundant. To back up this idea, we just need to string together some visuals showing how dangerous it will be for our heroes. I also took out all the title cards from the trailer. They're just giving general action movie vibes. The only title card that I kind of kept was at the very end when it says in theaters July, but I changed the font to one that I created based on the Jurassic Park logo. I've been using my custom font throughout this video actually, and I also made a style of the font that doesn't have the inline through the letters. But anyways, sorry for the tangent. That shows how absolutely obsessive I get about my interests. Back to this string of visuals that show the dangers of this new island. I think it's really important for you to soak it all in without interruptions from dialogue or title cards. And then we can end that whole sequence with this line.
Survival is a long shot.
Just like in the original trailer. I think the performance of Jonathan Bailey is really great here, and it conveys the hopelessness of their journey. And then the only thing I cut out from this ending bit was...
None of what you just said is good.
It just adds humor to the very end, undercutting the final moment of tension. I wanted to end on a stronger note that keeps us marinating in the tension. And then we cut to this new title card that I created in Blender, Jurassic Park Unborn. Let's talk about the title. Jurassic World Rebirth is fine, but I think we can do better. I went with Jurassic Park Unborn because it accomplishes two things. One, it brings us back to Jurassic Park instead of Jurassic World. If this movie is meant to be a return to the franchise's roots, why not reflect that in the title? Two, it references the film's story. From what we know from this trailer, this new island was a research facility for the original park that never came to be, hence Unborn. Now, I get why they chose Rebirth. They wanted to signal a fresh start, but if that's really the goal, I think another title change is in order. David Koepp and Gareth Edwards have said that they're trying to get back to the roots of the original Jurassic Park franchise, so I'm just confused why they wouldn't want to go back to calling the franchise Park instead of World. There's probably some legal reason why they don't go back to it, but who knows. All I know is that this is trying to separate itself from the Jurassic World trilogy, but they're keeping the name for some reason. Maybe they need to do a completely new name like Jurassic Island, or maybe something like The Lost World and call it The Lost Park Jurassic World. I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. What do you think of this new era of the Jurassic World franchise, and what should it be called? Last but definitely not least, sound design and score are huge for setting the tone of a trailer. The trailer had some pretty standard action music with some accents of John Williams' original score, but I wanted to bring in something that felt more classic, something that leaned into mystery, horror, suspense, and awe. So I spliced together music from Jurassic Park and Jurassic Park 3. During Hammond's opening speech, I used the Jurassic Park opening title soundtrack. It really puts us in the right headspace. I mean, there's a reason why John Williams composed it for the opening credits of the original film. The rest of the trailer is pretty much just a back and forth between two pieces. The T-Rex rescue and finale from the first Jurassic Park, and the Raptor Room from JP3. They are both incredible pieces that perfectly blend tension and action in a way that really gives the trailer the punch it needs to get you excited to watch a Jurassic movie. In order to replace the music, I had to strip the voices from the original audio and completely rebuild the sound design from scratch. Here are a few moments from my re-edit without music to highlight the new sound effects.
Can you be ready tomorrow?
Move up towards Barbados. Avoid government patrol.
We need DNA from the 3 biggest dinosaurs.
Maybe we should make it quick.
Survival is a long shot.
Also, in this sequence, there was originally dialogue being spoken by Henry Loomis, but I think it has a much greater impact when you get to experience just visuals, music, and sound effects without needing to engage the language part of your brain. I think this is a string of moments meant for feeling, not understanding. So letting this section breathe on its own was very important to me, and it's ended up being kind of like my favorite part of my re-edit. So that's it for the breakdown of my re-edit of the Jurassic World Rebirth trailer. If you like this, please be sure to subscribe and follow me on my other social medias. I've done a bunch of other re-edits for mostly Star Wars, but maybe I'm jumping into more Jurassic content. Who knows? I love both franchises. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Please let me know what you thought of this re-edit and the breakdown in the comments down below. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.